talk with every sip and laugh. Coffee's the fuel, martini's the craft. Conversation swirling in the cool night air. Talk the walk, we're going somewhere.
Good morning, Alan.
You know, Leanne, not everybody has a jingle. And I realized watching the pictures, I better keep changing my shirt.
You better keep changing your shirt. Yeah. And I think I said this to you last time, everyone should have a jingle because it takes no time with AI now. You can just, if you can write a sentence and you can prompt what you want to get, it'll create it. Yeah. I spent way too much time doing that though, because there were like 18 different versions of the jingle.
That's why we make a good pair. You have all this patience. I have no patience. So it sort of evens out.
I've never been told that I have patience before, but maybe compared to you, I am pretty patient. So welcome to Talk the Walk. This is our first episode of 2025, a brand new year. We've made it. What are you excited about this year?
Well, I mean, I think I look at every year as a tremendous opportunity. Here I'm still alive. I'm not in the obituaries. This is a big thing. And I also think in a more serious vein that it's going to be a good year because I think these wars are going to end just from attrition and exhaustion. I think that Trump in the United States here, you can't listen to what he says. You have to watch what he does. And it's not going to be a disaster. In fact, some good things will probably happen. And I think that at least in the U.S., you tell me about Australia, but in the U.S., I mean, you look at Western Europe, the economy is awful. You look at China, the economy is awful. But the economy here is very good. And so it's tremendous opportunity for us here. And, in bad times, you suffer. In good times, you make the best of it.
Yeah. I think with our economy, it really depends on what you read, who you talk to, and then also what you observe. And I remember you talking about just being an observer of things. And yes, there's certain industries that are struggling, but others just maintain insane profitability, like always. And I think as consultants, just being really aware of that and seeing where you can sort of potentially pivot and support as well. But I think being in Australia as well, it's good and bad. It's bad because we're so far away from the rest of the world. It takes 24 hours for me to get to London, but that's also a good thing. We're so just, at the butt end of the world, pretty much. It's actually quite nice.
I remember that movie On the Beach. I think it was Neville Shute. I'm not sure, but On the Beach, Australia was the last country standing after the.
That's right.
And we had a submarine there. The U.S. had a submarine, and but eventually the radiation kept creeping down. I don't know why I bring this up, but I remember you were the only ones left at the time.
Starting off the year talking about doomsday.
Yeah.
Now, if you're here live, let us know where you're joining us from. Are you from a part of the world that, might be the end to feel that nuclear reaction, or are you a bit closer? And today we're talking about stories that stick. So let us know where you're joining us from and what questions or comments that you have. We always love hearing your comments on the show. Stephen, I think Stephen's in Adelaide. We aren't the butt end of the world. Turn the globe upside down. Very good. It's all about perspective, Stephen. So, Alan, telling stories that stick, I think this is the perfect topic because you are a master storyteller. And I was going to ask you just to quick kick off, being a great storyteller, is it nature or nurture?
Oh, I think it's both. And because you have to learn the cadence and you have to learn to transition to a point. I'll give you an example of that in a minute. But you also have to be willing to look around you and say, oh my God, I can use this. So it's not like you say, I need a story on innovation. You see something happen and you say, that's a great story. Let me figure out how I can make a good point with it. So it's not like a joke where you insert a joke to get a laugh, even if it's not relevant. So I think it's both. That's a good point you raise. And there's, if a picture's worth 1,000 words, a story's worth 1,000 pictures.
Oh, that's really good. Now, what I find interesting is anytime I ask you a question, I kind of want to anticipate what I think you're going to say back to me. And when I had the nature nurture thing, I thought Alan's going to say it's completely nurture, that you can develop this. And you've just said both. We're just going to pause on that for a moment while I welcome people into the show. So Nicole, great to see you. Nicole's a great friend down at Buds Beach.
Yeah, just talked to Nicole yesterday. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Down the Gold Coast. Great to have you here. Sarah is in Melbourne. A lot of Aussies on the call today. So we are at the butt end of the world, but we are prolific in showing up. Sarah's in Melbourne, also a storyteller, and keen to hear what Alan has to say. And Sarah, feel free to share your tips and your questions in here. So yeah, you think it's also a bit of nature, because I do know there's people out there that are just like, you were a born storyteller. Like you know, they need no work. Their stories they're engaging. They know what to say, when to stop. Talk more about the nature side of things.
Well, I'm basically lazy, as you know. So telling stories just gets you where you want to go much, much faster. But more than that, people say, I was like that. I was there. That happened to me. And they're engaged. And what you and I do is about trust. So I'm going to give you a quick example.
Mm-hmm.
I'm downstairs one day watching football on the TV. I have a fireplace on. It was last winter. And midway through the football game, I notice I'm not seeing the screen clearly, and there's smoke coming down from the ceiling light fixtures. Now, I'm an American male watching football, so the question is, do I suffer the smoke till the end of the game, or do I do something about this? So I decided probably a fire hazard. So I look up on the internet, chimney repair, and there are 4 entries for chimney repair, 24 hours a day, right? This was a Sunday. So the first guy says, well, he says, this happens. You get a leak there, he says, and we take down the chimney. I said, really? He said, brick by brick, we label it so it goes up the same way. I said, how much is that? He says, well, it's $15,000. I said, to take it down and put it back up? He said, no, just to take it down. Oh. So I called the second guy, and the second guy, I said, do you take down the chimney? He says, well, we use acoustics. I said, acoustics? This is very modern. What do you do? He says, well, we make sounds, and when the sound changes, we know that that's probably where the leak is.
Wow.
I said, well, that's great. What if you can't tell right away? He says, well, we take down the chimney. Third guy, he uses an infrared camera. State of the art. I said, how do you do that? We drop it down from the top, he says. This is how you do these things. I said, well, that sounds just what I need. So, well, let me tell you in all candor, he says. We don't always find the leak that way. I said, why not? He says, because it's dark in there, he says. Fourth guy is a CCE, a certified chimney expert. And he says, can I ask you some questions? And I said, sure. He said, have you remodeled it all in your house? I said, well, yeah, about a month ago. He said, did that affect the air conditioning and ventilation? I said, yes, it did. I said, my God, this is like the great Kreskin. This guy is brilliant. He says to me, you don't have a leak. He says, you have a pressure problem. And when you remodeled, there's not enough pressure. There's too much pressure in the fireplace. It's causing the smoke to stay in the room. I said, wait a minute. The smoke is coming out of the lights. He says, sir, smoke rises. You're just seeing it in the lights because it's the first time it's visible in the lights. I said, oh, I knew that. Well, this is a very expensive fix. I said, really? How much is it? He says, well, it's custom made. They're $1,200. I said, how fast can you get here?
Yeah.
This guy is a chimney expert, but he's a diagnostician.
Yes.
And he asks the same questions that I ask people when I consult or that a doctor asks a patient. These are critical thinking skills. So no matter what you do, white collar, blue collar, doesn't matter what you do, if you can diagnose quickly, you're going to be more valuable to everyone. And that's why we need to learn from the chimney guy.
Yeah, right. So that's an example of something that just happened to you that you've now woven into, remembered, this is a great story. I can bring it in to teach other consultants how to be diagnostic. Is that what you're sort of demonstrating there?
That's right. The importance of knowing critical thinking skills and being a diagnostician. And if you look at doctors or plumbers or us, you and I, this is what we do well.
Yeah. Amazing. I want to continue on that line of thought. Ian, welcome. Great to have you from the sunny Gold Coast. And Ricky, hello. What a surprise on a Wednesday morning to see the both of you on screen. Ricky's one of our, you've been on a few calls. Ricky, it's great to have your big smiling face with us as well. Now, with that story that you told, Alan, you didn't start from problem with the chimney. You gave me some description around, you kind of were a bit, I'm a male watching football. Do I wait for the game to be over? Like that was a bit, you started there. You started the story there. Why there and not, I've had this problem with my chimney. Why not start a bit later on?
You want to start a story like you start a novel. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, right? They call me Ishmael. You think of the great novels, they start with a clever line. So you want to start a story, as a novel, even though it's a true story. The second thing is you want to put in enough detail. Picture a story as a canvas. You want to put enough detail in there to give perspective. All great art needs perspective, light, angles. So you don't want to say, I was watching football, the chimney started to leak. But when you put it there, I was watching a game, people listening say, oh, yeah, that happened to me at the rugby game, or in your case, netball. And so You want to paint in enough detail, not to make the story too long, but to paint people into the picture. And when you get that right, I mean, I've told that story I just told you hundreds of times, right?
Yeah.
You never change the story. You keep the cadence and the spacing and the stress. You never change it once you know it works.
Yeah. And I think, I will ask you this question around what makes a story sticky, but that point around cadence, I think, can really throw some people, because I know I've been on the end of someone telling a story, and I think, this would have been a good story if you'd compressed it. It goes too long, or they set up the scene, or they bring that narrative, and it's too long. Like, it's like, how long's a piece of string? Like, how do you know what length the story should be?
Well, it depends on the topic and it depends on the content, but I would tell you this. I have stories that take about 15 seconds to tell, and stories that are 2 minutes to tell. The longest story I tell is probably 3 minutes. And it's the longest, but it's very carefully crafted, and it works in certain instances, but normally they're much shorter than that. And that gives you the option when you're speaking to use several stories, because if they're brief enough, you can include several without overwhelming people.
I've had feedback. I've shared. I've been so into the story that when I actually land the point, I kind of move on, because I've spent so much time on the story, and then I land the point, but I don't really then share like what the real lesson was. How do you transition a story into that learning moment?
Well, there are three aspects. The first is there's the setup. And so you say, I was watching football, I was on a boat, I got hit in the head with a golf ball, whatever it is. So there's the setup. Then you tell the story that has a point. There's a point in there, but people aren't sure what it is yet. And then the third part is the transition to the learning point. And so we need diagnostic skills, and here's how we use them, okay? And another story I tell, it's never act on assumptions because they become reality. And it's about a time I thought I was drowning, and I really wasn't.
Is that the story where you thought you were drowning, but you just put your feet down and you could stand in the water?
I was treading water because I turned the boat over, and I was screaming towards shore, and they finally came out to me, and the guy in the boat jumped in the water and walked over to me. And there's a crowd on the beach, and my wife is staring at the sky.
You must have been hyperventilating as well. I'm sure you were panicking.
But what I end that story with is perception is reality. If you think you're treading water, if you're treading water, you think the water is deep. And who do you think, therefore, you are in terms of a professional? Because your perception will manifest and inform your behaviors.
So good. Look, you've even just brought in a quick story right there. And Richard said, just reflecting on what you shared before, Alan, love that. All great art needs perspective, light, and angles. So it's like really playing off, like, where do you want to go? And how do I give you the opposite of that before we move into that direction? It's almost like setting up a problem and solution rather than just giving the solution immediately. You want to set up like that problem, that frame, before leading everyone into the other one.
Well, yeah, you have to get them sort of into the gallery so they can look at the art. But the thing about any piece of art, whether it's spoken or it's visual or even performance art, there has to be a frame, a real frame or a perceived frame, because it's within the frame that you appreciate the art. We were over last time we were in Paris a year or so ago. We went again to see the Mona Lisa. And what always occurs to me when I see it is, if that picture, as beautifully as it's painted, had been framed differently, it wouldn't have the same effect. If it were 2 inches to the left or 2 inches to the right in the frame, it wouldn't have the same effect. So the frame was as important as the beauty of the art, or let's just say it brought out the beauty that much better.
Yeah. So just in that moment, and obviously this hasn't been set up, Richard's just asked this question and you've just given me a reference to the Mona Lisa. What anchored you in? Like, did you read Richard's comment around art and then thought, great, I've got a story about this in Paris and framed? Like, what was your thinking?
I used triggers, and the trigger here was the frame. So he said, great art needs perspective, light, and angles, where perspective is created based on your focus, and your focus is guided by the frame. And because otherwise you wander off, right? And if you look at any piece of art, you'll find the frame defines it. And if you look at somebody, if you or I are up speaking on a stage, we're speaking on a topic, and we're setting up a frame, a metaphorical frame of what we're going to be talking about and why it's valuable to the audience. And so it's okay to tell a story or even to ad lib, so long as you stay in the frame. if you tell a story about somebody, drowning in the ocean, or you tell a story about something to do with a complete different topic, people are going to wonder where the hell they are.
Yeah. I'm wondering, I've got a story. Well, I'm just out, before we started recording today, I was just out in my front yard, like looking at the birds and, having a coffee out there. So I'm on my second coffee right now. And I was reminded of something that happened. I'm curious how I'd set this story up. So my husband works away 7 days and then he's back for 7 days. While he was away, it started raining a lot. So our lawn needed to be mowed. And I haven't touched a lawnmower in about 5 years, but I thought I'd be helpful and drag it out and mow the lawn. So it was beautiful when he got back. I rolled it to the front door and I start. And unfortunately, I didn't know this. I didn't pick it up, but the mower is at its lowest setting. So basically, I've mowed a patch of lawn. I've completely kind of killed it. It looks like something phallic, to be honest. There's like phallic outline sitting on my front lawn. And it's still there, like, because it hasn't grown back yet. And I think there's a few things I could take from this story. But, how would you frame that if that was your story, Alan? Where would you start?
Well, I probably wouldn't use phallic in front of an audience, but be that as it may.
Okay.
I think what I would talk about is the fact that just because you have good intentions doesn't mean you'll have a good outcome. Because that's what you really said there. Now, I'll tell you how this triggers things. I'm in Puerto Rico for my son's wedding. We're at a resort, and whenever we're near the ocean, I go down early. I want to be on the beach with the birds, not people. And I look from my hotel window, 8 o'clock, the guys are setting up. I race down, and he says, well, sir, you're very early, but show me where you want to go. I'll bring you a chair. And he says, I'll come back with an umbrella and a table. So I put my gear down, and next to the chair is a crab. And I said, this crab got washed up last night, and the sun's going to come out soon. I got to get the crab out of here. It's going to die, and it's going to sizzle in the sun, fry. And so I'm figuring out how to pick up this crab without getting nipped. And as I bend down, there's a second crab. And so now I'm thinking, can I get both crabs at once, or does it take 2 trips?
How big are these crabs?
They're about this big. About this big.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, yeah, pretty big.
I was thinking like little hermit ones. All right.
And so as I'm bending down, third crab. So now I think it's a crab massacre. These all got washed up and they can't get back. Guy comes with my chair and umbrella and he says, sir, what are you doing? I said, I have to save these crabs. They're going to die. He said, sir, they're sand crabs. They live in burrows in the beach. You put them in the water, they'll drown. I said, no. These are crabs. He said, so step away from the crabs. And what I'm telling you is that no matter how good our intentions are, if we don't have accurate information, we can cause great harm.
That's awesome.
So your harm was embarrassment. You got this phallic symbol on your lawn. My harm I wouldn't never have forgiven myself if I drowned in 3 crabs.
I know. Really cool. I love that. Okay. And I love how you shared the transition there as well. Sarah shares, I also explain the learning when I tell stories in business. But Seth Godin says you shouldn't steal the revelation, let people to work it out themselves. Now, Alan, I know you're peers with Seth, you're friends with him. What do you think about that? Like, should you reveal it for them or let them come to their own conclusion?
Seth and I disagree on 2 things. One is tribes versus communities, and this is the other thing. But Seth's a brilliant guy. But I think some people miss the revelation. Some people you have to hit the head with revelation. And if you're dealing with a large group of people, you can't afford for some of them to say, what? And others to say, oh, I get it. Because that sort of becomes disjointing. Now, if you're just talking to somebody at a bar with a drink, let them think about it. And there are a lot of good examples of that. But I think that in a book, you can let them work out the revelation. And Seth writes good books. And 3 pages later, then you can describe it. Make sure everybody knows it. I think that's the difference. Yeah. So, and then some things should be self-evident. Here's a quick example. I told you some of my stories in 15 seconds. I'm sitting at our beach house in Nantucket, and it's early in the morning again, and I go out there to write, but I'm watching all the robins land on the lawn because they're pulling worms out of the ground. And I'm saying to myself, well, they say the early bird gets the worm. And then it occurred to me, but the early worm gets eaten. So that takes 15 seconds to tell. I think it's self-revealing, but I think if you allow a few seconds after that, people have to start thinking, maybe I shouldn't always try to be first in line. Yeah. Maybe I should wait and see. And if I wanted to go further, I'd point out that Hewlett-Packard, one of my clients over the years, made its living by being the second one to the market.
Yeah, that's right. good reminder for me as well, in terms of like not always having to be the first one and kind of slowing down a bit and waiting someone else to take their turn. This is a really good question from Sarah, because it also, I know in previous conversations we've had when it comes to when you're running a training session, like you always teach the top third of the room as well.
Right.
So when it comes to stories, it's like, yeah, maybe give them some time, but then like, I like that idea of like hitting them on the head with like, this is what I'm trying to share with you, and then leading into that.
Yeah, because I don't want somebody 10 minutes later to say, oh my God, I just got it.
Okay. Ricky says Aesop was a great teacher in storytelling. I do love those fables as well. And Richard says, Sarah, I tend to do the Seth Godin method, but read the audience to see if they need me to point out the point. Yeah, that's a really good sort of lesson as well. Like read the room too. Now, what you're good, like we talked about triggers before and sharing the right story at the right time. Like talk more about that. Is it just like sensing that word and then jumping into it? Is there other times where you're like, okay, this doesn't need a story, I can just give you the point? Like, what's the balance?
Well, yeah, but I think I use triggers for social proof. I use it for stories. I use it for examples. And sometimes all three of those things are the same thing. But I find that I don't do research. My books are based on modest investigation, but no research. I use social proof. So you have anecdotal writers like Marshall Goldsmith and me and Seth Godin. And then you have scientific writers like, say, Malcolm Gladwell and so forth.
Yeah.
But he and Dan Pink and people like this, I know, it takes them forever to get a book out because there's all this research that goes into it. I can write a book quickly because I look for examples to prove my point. So if I'm talking to a client or somebody new or I want to influence them, I'm constantly thinking, what can I make my case with quickly? But all I need is that trigger. And I know how to grab something because these index cards keep flipping over in here. And before we're done, I can tell people how to keep track of their stories for easy use.
Yeah.
But after you're around a while, as I've been, there are a hell of a lot of stories.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, well, I'm like 41 now. I thought I was 40 still. I'm 41 now. I mean, I've got a bucket full of stories, but I can only really recall, like when I need a story, I only think of like, oh, these are the 5 that I've kind of worked up. So talk us through like that index card system that's in your own mind. Is it actually a physical index card system? Like, do you have both? How do you store these?
Well, I know a woman she since passed away. Her name was Jeannie Robertson, and we were both in the Speakers Hall of Fame. And she would attend some sessions I was in and vice versa. She was a humorist and I made her laugh sometimes, which was a great accolade for me to make her laugh. But she taught me how to keep a speaking log. And what it is, I keep it on some software here called FileMaker Pro. You can put it on an Excel sheet. And I put the first 3 or 4 words of a story down. And then I have 3 categories below it. It might be San Francisco, sports, weather, whatever it relates to. And so I could find them quickly. So if I'm speaking in San Francisco, I punch up San Francisco, I have 7 stories. She used this to help her prevent telling the same stories at the same clients because she spoke a lot. But I find that having electronically, it sort of embedded itself in my cerebral cortex or something.
Yeah.
And so these index cards come up and you say certain words and they trigger it. And I'll tell you a story about Jeannie Robertson. Jeannie Robertson was one of these women who was a beauty contestant, but her trouble was she had no talent. So she interviewed well and she looked good in a bathing suit, which is how they did it. But she had no talent. So she invented a baton twirling act, but it was an invisible baton. And so she'd come out on stage and she'd throw this invisible baton and she'd catch it. And everybody would start looking around. And then she'd throw it up behind her back and she'd catch it. And at the end of this act, which everybody thought was the strangest thing they'd ever seen, now this is all pantomime, she lit the baton. She set it on fire. And you can see her light it, and she threw it up. And then she pretended that she lost balance and it was coming down right on the judges' heads. And she'd race over to grab it. And do you know all the judges ducked?
Love that.
That's how you win a talent contest. Perception is everything.
Perception is everything. Now, if you're listening to this, you can't see Alan's body language, but when you do tell a story, like when you told the crab story, you kind of did that.
Yeah.
You showed obviously the baton and it twirling was really part of the story. So you used your body language. Do you rehearse telling these stories or like with the body language or like what do you do?
No, I only rehearse a new story. Like I said, once I have a
new story.
For example, with that log I told you about, I just have 3 words of the story. I don't have the story there. If I don't recognize it from those 3 words, I throw it out. It's got to be that much ingrained in my system. So it's just got to be the reminder. So I never change that. But a new story, sometimes my wife will be with me. We'll be on an airplane going somewhere to a business meeting. My wife will say, "You practicing a new story?" I said, "Why do you say that?" She says, "Because your lips are moving."
Ah, nice to know that you actually rehearse these. I've got to, by the way, I'm hogging all the airtime. If you're joining us live and you have any questions about storytelling, let us know in the comments. I did have a question around story and like sort of rehearsal, but I kind of lost it. Just I was asking people to contribute. So, what was it? I was very curious. Oh yeah, this is it. You've got a really strong background in writing. Like you're a very powerful writer, like even just from your Monday morning memos through to your books. Do you think being a good writer has contributed to you being a good storyteller? Like, is it worth us honing the craft of writing? Like, or can you do that? Or can you just be a great storyteller without building up a habit of?
That's a great question. Let me say, there are 2 things here. The first is, yes, you can be a great storyteller without being a great writer. You can be a great writer without being a great storyteller. So there's no question. However, here's the second thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do both, you got it made in the shade, because people tell me they read my books because reading what I write sounds like they're listening to me. And when I speak to people, they say that's exactly how you write in your books. So a consistency of your communication, people love. So the smart publishers have me narrate my own books. They don't hire some actor because it's much more powerful. So if you can do both, it's great, but you don't have to.
Yeah, good. Okay. Yeah, and I think that's the biggest compliment I got from my last book, is like, oh, I felt like you were like by my side sort of talking to me. And when I know this is, I don't know what you think about this, because I know it's not your approach, but sometimes like I just get stuck writing. And so I'll just go outside, take my phone and just narrate what I want to write about and just talk it through and then just transcribe that. Because I don't know, sitting down and writing just is not, it's not, doesn't come naturally.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So do you think innately that women or men are better storytellers?
I think I would like to say both, but when I'm thinking about my favorite storytellers are actually all male. So that's terrible. I don't, yeah, but I said that out loud. It's my initial response. I was thinking my favorite storytellers all happen to be men, but
you think of somebody like Jerry Seinfeld, who's a great storyteller.
Yeah.
He's telling stories everybody can relate to. And his stories are clean, they're not obscene or anything. And he's interesting to listen to, because while it seems like the environment he's talking is mundane, like his t-shirt didn't make it through the wash and things like this, he's actually teaching lessons that a lot of us have had to learn.
Yeah. And that's why there's so when I was thinking of like, who are my favorite storytellers, what gender are they in that sort of quick 5 seconds? I mean, a guy, Matthew Dix, he is phenomenal. And he just talks about everyday life and what was going on in his mind. And it's super relatable. It's not around the time that he had a near-death experience. It's about just every day. And I think what you're talking about with the index cards, what Matthew Dix shares is a concept of homework for life, where you just, what happened today, and just write it down and store it. Yeah. Do you have a favorite story, Alan?
Oh God, I have a lot of favorite stories. I mean, you have
like your favorite song, right? It's a hard one to pick.
We have time here. Well, look, my wife and I go sailing with this guy who is an expert sailor, and neither one of us know anything about sailing. But sailing is a cult. This is one of my long stories about it. Sailing is a cult.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so, it's aft and it's starboard and it's port and it's all this kind of stuff. So we're in Newport here in the harbor sailing. And he says, look, Alan, you take over the steering here. I am going to go forward and adjust the rigging, he says. I said, okay. So something happens and the boat turns on its side and Ron is hanging from the mast. And my wife, who's got 3 life jackets on, is in the water. She's half immersed. And if you've ever seen like an alligator, where only its eyes and its snout is above the water, all you could see was my wife's face and her breasts. That's it. So these boats are meant to right themselves, and the thing snaps up. Ron collapses on deck. We haul my wife in. All the rigging is fallen down. And Ron says to me, I'll steer. I said, I'm not the one who went forward. You went forward. He says, I'll steer. So we go back to the dock, and he says to me, that's our slip. We're going to sail into that. He said, I want you to sail into that slip. I will jump on the dock and make us fast, he says, another nautical term. So we get to the slip. He says, don't let me down. I got the boat lined up. Sure enough, Ron jumps on the dock. And then a funny thing happened. We passed Ron, and Ron suddenly is running up next to the boat like a crazy person. And he tries to jump in front of it, and the boat creams the dock and it creams him. So my wife and I get out of the boat. We go get Ron. Now, Ron did not tell me to change the boat from forward to reverse and neutral. He just said, drive into the dock. And that's what I did.
Drive into the dock.
And so I said to him, Ron, I'm no sailor, but there's got to be an easier way to dock a boat. And the fact here is that it's not enough to give people directions when you're an expert and they're not.
Yeah.
You have to understand where the other person is.
Yeah.
And so you have to say to them, take it out of forward and put it into neutral and don't go past me. And too many times we assume the other person knows we know. So we're teaching them to ski, or we're teaching them to sell, and we assume they know more than they do.
Yeah, I do this a lot, actually. It's like the curse of knowledge. You just assume that, and there's so many assumptions within it. It's really hard to have that beginner mindset, but I think you do that really well by asking questions to help diagnose where that person is.
It's all about perspective. That's a great phrase, the curse of knowledge. I like it. But
Yeah.
It's all about perspective. And we just can't assume that people know. We have to test their understanding.
Yeah, love that. I was envisioning this. Yeah, sailing, like, I'd love to get into it, but it's like, I don't think it's my thing. I think.
Right.
Nicole, tell us the airplane one, pushing buttons. Maybe we'll put that on for next time, Nicole, for the next live stream. But it's
I get requests.
Yeah, we'll take requests for the next story. For story time, maybe that's a segment we have here on Talk the Walk every week. Our next live stream is on Thursday, the 30th of Jan, 4 p.m. Eastern time. That's Friday, the 31st of Jan. Yep, at 7 a.m. I just want to share, I'm also doing a daily podcast this year. It's called Leanne on Demand. I don't know if you can see it there. So I've been podcasting for 7 days in a row now. Episode 8 released today. And the replay of Talk the Walk, I'll throw into a weekend episode as well. So
how long is that, Leanne?
Sorry?
How long is Leanne on Demand?
My individual episodes are between 5 to 12 minutes every day. And then on the weekend, I'll do like throw this up or an old interview or something up, like a 60-minute thing. Yeah. So it's really fun. I've got my notes full of just ideas for different episodes and things that are coming up too. So
you work harder than I do. I just do a minute with Alan.
Yeah, I love the minute with Alan, but I think that's inspired me. It's like, oh, you're doing this every single day. And I think it's a good idea because I have all these ideas. Where do I put them? And I think I can put them into this podcast and create something that's kind of helpful for others, hopefully too.
Well, you have great natural energy. And so that's going to help you tell any story.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. And for you that joined us, thanks so much for being here today. We love having your questions and comments on the live stream. Hopefully we get to see you at the next Talk the Walk. Till then, have a good evening, Alan.
And have a good morning for you.
Thank you.